Well, as I've said in other contexts, the Democrat Party is officially the party of Satan. And, yeah, if you had a political party, it would be the Democrats. I mean, they've gone so far into the depths of moral depravity that it's a parody of itself.
Hmm.
I mean, even Babylon B is having difficulty parodying the Democrat Party at this point because we've never seen anything like this. There's been a dramatic acceleration. I pointed out to someone else not too long ago that the Democrats of less than a lifetime ago would look at even today's conservative Republicans as radical liberals.
Hmm.
What would they think of their own party? They wouldn't, but they'd be reduced to paroxysms of fear at what that party has become. So, as far as mocking Catholicism is concerned, well, that's what this has always been about. It's always been about Catholicism. In the state, the enemies of the truth recognize that the greatest threat to their final triumph of evil over good has always been the Catholic Church. And the parallel within the church is that the enemies of tradition in the church have always recognized that traditionalists are the greatest threat to their triumph.
Yeah.
So we have MAGA Republicans, and I guess we have the analog of MAGA Catholics within the Catholic Church.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of the 19th, early 20th century liberal Catholics, some of the hierarchy, some of the more liberal Catholics thought they could strike a deal with liberalism, right? We'll kind of acknowledge you, we'll make our peace with you, and you'll accept us into society. You'll accept Catholics, you'll give us space, and that'll help us build up the church and the freedom. I mean, this I think ultimately was the thinking of John Courtney Murray, one of the main movers behind religious liberty at the council, and a lot of the normal Catholics and even the popes at the time said, "You're playing with fire, right? Liberalism will turn on you. This is a really a Faustian bargain." I mean, do you think those prophets of doom, to use John the 23rd's phrase, were right? And you can't really make a pact with liberalism.
Well, Ratzinger made the point that one of the problems with the council, he says it in a gentle way, whereas we say it more forthrightly, is that something of the optimism of the Kennedy era pervaded the deliberations of the council,
Hmm.
which would be the first time in the history of ecumenical councils that a political sentiment played a role in the formulation of Catholic doctrines by a council. But this was a council like no other, and anyone who denies that doesn't know anything about church history.
Hmm.
No other council but this council got involved in basically writing anthropology papers and sociology papers, incompetent ones at that, commenting on contemporary conditions, the means of social communication, the aspirations of modern man, all kinds of commentary that had nothing to do with the defense of Catholic doctrine and dogma. And the result has been basically an invasion of the church by worldly thinking, as Paul VI lamented. The church said, "We're going to get down with the world now and speak the language of the world. We invite you to commune with us and have dialogue on your terms." And we ended up speaking on their terms. And now the
Hmm.
church has been thoroughly secularized. As we see with Francis and his latest pronouncements against certain sins that I guess we'll get to in a moment.
We'll get to in a moment. But I think even more than that, I mean, it seems like all of these ideologies that make up liberalism tend to deliver the opposite of what they promise, right? So liberalism, communism promises prosperity to everyone and brings poverty, right? Feminism promises, liberation of women and ends up just making women, into slaves. I mean, there have been no greater proliferation of sort of the treating of women as sexual objects than since the feminist movement has come about. And liberalism promises freedom and toleration and ultimately seems to bring kind of persecution.
Notice how all of those lies trace back to the founding lie of the father of lies. You will not die the death.
Very true.
So that's what liberalism tells us. We will not die the death if we follow liberalism's prescriptions, but those prescriptions lead precisely to death, the death of the moral order, the death of the soul, and the elimination of any influence of the Catholic Church over the body politic. We said this before on the show. Leo the 13th likened that separation of the body politic from the church to the separation of the body from its soul. And what happens when you separate the body from its soul? You get a rotting corpse. It may take 150, 200 years for the putrefaction to be completed, but we're in the final stages of that right now.